picking up the head today over here at Opal Engineering, right there. I will say they were actually pretty quick about getting it finished up, so that's always a good thing. I dropped it off on Friday. Yeah, I dropped it off Friday midday. They're closed on the weekends, and on Monday they had fully inspected the head. I told them what to do, and then like an hour after they called me and told me it was inspected, they were done with it. So always a good thing. Fast service is always appreciated. But I guess the guys that did the downpipe on the S14 just kind of started me off wrong when it came to doing stuff with shops, because they took like 2-3 months to do the downpipe on it. So I expect everybody to take forever. And since that is the case, the head is done, but the head gasket replacement is not here. In fact, I haven't even ordered it yet because I didn't expect them to get done that fast. So I'm gonna just pick it up for now. We're gonna go ahead and order the head gasket today, and then when that all comes, we'll get back at the reassembly process. Well, alright, so you guys have probably just seen the clip with all the heads after me picking it up from the machine shop and everything, so we are good to go on that. I have ordered the gasket, so that shipped yesterday, and we're just waiting on that to get here to start putting this thing back together for the most part. But in the meantime, I'm doing all the miscellaneous things. You guys would have just saw that I got the new brake line relocation to get those lines, hard lines, out the way and heat protected and stuff like that. I also just installed the clutch line. So one thing that I previously left uninstalled was the clutch, which is that red line right there, to keep me from wanting to drive it, knowing that it was capable of running and driving. But now that this is probably going to be the final put back together and stuff, I installed that as well. Nothing special with that. On the other side of things, over here, I have rerouted the wiring harness over here by the block, just to get more room in this area. I've tightened up all of the fittings on the oil sandwich plate, so these fittings are tightened. This one was actually loose, so that was one of the oil leaks I was having. Tightened both of the sensors down, tightened those fittings as well. I couldn't fully reroute it because all of this stuff goes onto the head, so I gotta wait. But the main harness body is back there, frees up a lot of room here. Just trying to clear it up as much as possible, so got rid of the brake lines and stuff like that. Another thing that I will do in the meantime is this ground wire that I got going off the battery. It works, but what you're supposed to do is just have it come off the engine to the chassis ground. So I'll probably be removing this wire entirely, and then that's probably going to be it for this side. Everything else is just the fuel lines and all the wires for the headlights and RGB stuff that I'm waiting until the car is like running for. But at least I got, a decent amount of stuff that's open, a little more space. Any space is appreciated with something like this. But this video is mostly going to be for the reseal of the oil pan gasket. So since I've done majority of the little work, now it's time for one of the big things. Of course, the oil is all out of the engine, or out of the oil pan to begin with, just because it's in there. That's the whole reason we started this. So we're gonna go ahead and start to reseal this. Reasoning why is because the big oil leak was coming from the oil pan gasket. I use high temp gasket maker, but that high temp gasket maker is not for sealing oil or liquids. It's just high temp gasket maker. So I messed up when I did that, when I did the oil pan gasket. So we got brand new Nissan liquid head gasket, or liquid gasket maker. So this stuff is what I'm going to be using to reseal the oil pan, and we should be good with that. Ooh. But I'm not really tripping on it too much because when I did replace the oil pan gasket, I did it with all new hardware. So it's not like we should have any broken bolts or anything like that. For the most part, with the oil pan, it's just all this stuff. You got a lot of these 10mm bolts. So there's that. And I know my oil pan is dented a little bit, but it seems to be fine. I gotta clean up the oil from when I drained it. But for the most part, those are all that's holding it in, those 10mm bolts. And then once you get those off, this thing pops off. The only thing that you got to get in addition to that is the transmission brackets. So I'm gonna go around to the side so you guys can actually see it, because when I did it outside of the car when it was like 50 times easier, but this one's inside the car. So the only other thing that you got preventing you from getting the rest of those 10mm off are these 2 bolts here, and then 2 bolts on the block, and this thing will come out, and then you have access to the oil pan bolts underneath it, and that's on both sides. And then once you get that done, it'll be a matter of wiggling this thing out of there. So I'm gonna go ahead and get started on that, really. Yeah, just wanted to capture real quick so you guys could see what it looks like underneath for those that are trying to do this and they're running the same setup. Here we go. All right, trying to get this. Now it's just a matter of getting this thing out, sewn out this way, and then boom. And now you can see underneath there, this is probably where the oil leak was coming from, this area. But you can see you now have access to the bolts that are back here as well. So you gotta do the same thing on the other side. But yeah, that's pretty much it. So I'm gonna knock off the other side and then we'll get to going on these oil pan bolts. So I got all of them out, and you can see that there's a few of them. Some of them were harder to get out than others, especially that last one that's over there. So after that, it's gonna just basically come out. You will have to put some effort in to pry this thing. You will have to put some effort in to pry this thing free. So just keep that in mind. I typically use the flathead method, where you get some flatheads and get them between the gasket, and it'll slowly pry itself off because it will still be on there. And then once you get those all in and finally pry this thing off, then you would slide it forward and down. Just to clear this part, because that back part is flat. You have the clearance to move it forward once you get it off of the block itself, and then you're good to go. so I got mine to drop, but the next thing is oil pickup right there. That's not going to move, or that's not going to allow this to come off. So you're going to have to disattach, or you're going to have to take that off, which is no big deal. It's just 2 bolts on each side, but just keep that in mind, because there is no way that you can pull this thing forward with that still in there. So I'm gonna go ahead and attach or disconnect that, and we're good. All right, we got it out and we are good to go. This is the pickup tube I was talking about, which is positioned like this, and since it's such a tight clearance down there, this part that's sticking up needed to come out so I can get that thing out. But we are good to go. We got it off. Now it is a very tight fit down there. Once you finally get everything loose, that's how much room you got to work with. So definitely take the time. Don't rush it. It's gonna take you a lot of effort to get that done, just to let you know. But coming out here from the bottom, looking at it, looks like we got some burn up there, but for the most part everything under here is looking all right. I mean, of course, outside of the oil. So it's definitely always good to check, just in case. You never want to put stuff back together after a rebuild like this and end up finding out about something else, like me. Put the whole thing back together just to find out that I had to reseal the oil pan and the head gasket. But yeah, so the next thing you want to do is you want to scrape off all of this residue. Just use like a razor blade or something, you'll be fine. You want to do it for both the block and the actual oil pan itself. Woo! I gotta find my razor blade. I don't know where it is for sure, but yeah, just scrape all that stuff off and then reseal with that stuff and put it back in. That's pretty much it. So I'm gonna scrape this stuff off camera. Yeah, this stuff wasn't sealing anything, but what is this? I think this is leftover assembly lube from the ARP stuff. As you can see, this oil was definitely not good, but that's been addressed in different videos. So yeah, I'll leave it at that. Just want to show you guys that this is by no means a clean job. It's gonna get messy, so be sure to have like towels and stuff like that, shop rags, whatever it is you gotta do, because you're gonna get this stuff everywhere with scraping it off, and it'll also be all up in there. You'll have to wipe down the inside as well. Do your best not to get anything inside there. It's just gonna be a pain to try and get in there and get all this excess and gasket off and stuff, but scraped it down as best as I could. I had to use a combination of the scraper with a regular razor blade knife and wire brush. I was trying to use my wire wheel on the drill, but I don't have the actual drill. I just have the impact, so this was just spinning around in there, and I didn't want to do that. The actual drill is at home, and I wanted to stop here just to go home and then get that and come back. You know, the garage where this car is like an hour away from where I actually stay, so that would have put it off. But yeah, so you get to this point, then you want to wipe everything down, and then after you wipe everything down, I'll show you how to, you know, put that in. You just kind of beat it around everything. Try to go around on the inside for the bolt holes, because if you go on the outside, I mean, it's should seal either way, but I like to go on the inside. I mean, if you have if you have enough, by all means go full circle, but I don't think I'm gonna have enough. I think I'm gonna have just enough, so I'm gonna leave it at that. Let me clean up this area, clean up this oil pan. Don't forget to do the same thing to the bottom of the engine block too, and then after you do all that, reseal it, pop it back in there, and you're pretty much good to go. you got everything wiped down as best as you can, scraped off as best as you can. It's definitely easier, I will say, to scrape everything off the block than it is the actual oil pan itself. But just take your time, do it right, get as much as you can. Doesn't matter if you can't get all of it. Like you can see there's still residue. Just you want to get most of it. And then I also took the time to just clean up this area for as much as I can in regards to the oil leak, just so that if I have another one, this area will be like wet again and I'll know that something else is going on. Another thing to keep in mind is that the pickup has a gasket, so if you take the pickup off and that little gasket falls out, please don't lose it. You will have to put it back. One of the things about working on cars in Chicago in the middle of a winter, this stuff freezes. It's actually frozen right now because it's been sitting in this garage for so long. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna leave it right here and I'm gonna go get some food. All right, that did work. We are back and it's done this on its own, so that's how I know it's able to come out now. And so now we can lay this. Alright, I'm running into a problem here where the oil pan came out easily, you saw that, but it won't go back in easily. So I'm trying to figure out, well, I have been trying to figure out how I can get a little more clearance between here, because the gap between the girdle and the power steering rack is not big enough for me to push it back in, apparently, but it was big enough for me to pull it out, so there's that, or at least not without scraping all the gasket out. So I've been looking around trying to figure out how to, the least hassle way of getting more clearance, and looks like the least hassle way of getting more clearance is to take the power steering rack out, which is a pain in the fucking ass. But considering that the column is already disconnected, it's just taking off the tie rods and then popping it out. I just didn't feel like doing all that, but it looks like that's what I'm gonna have to do. So I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna do that off camera. I'm pretty sure I have a video or something like that where I'm putting in this power steering rack twice. So yeah, I ain't gonna record that one, but yeah. Alright guys, got it sorted. So the rack, as you can see, is not hard mounted. It's actually just hanging by the lines here and the lines over there, because I didn't want to completely uninstall it. But due to the fact that the rack is now out-ish, now we got all this clearance that we didn't have before. So I would take the time to install the oil pan. Then as soon as the oil pan is bolted up, pop the rack back in, and then we're good. Alright guys, so we got them all tightened down on all sides. I'm gonna cut the video here because that is essentially the end of the job. The only thing that you do after that is bolt up the transmission brackets for my swap with the CD09 and stuff, and bolt back in the power steering rack, and then you're good to go. So if you need to reseal an oil pan, with a S14 with the rb25 Neo swap that's using stock cross member with eBay swap brackets and Megan Racing mounts. That's how you do it. It's oddly very specific, but surprisingly I feel like a lot of people would probably want to see the process of getting that out without having to pull the engine, because that could be if I didn't know any better, I would have thought I would have had to drop the cross member and have the engine hoisted up so I could have enough space, but turns out you don't. So that should fix the big oil leak problem. The sandwich plate was the other one, so unless there's something else going on, should have no oil leaks from this point forward. So, and that's also without, well, you know, with the exception of routing all of the new brake lines and stuff like that so that they are good and away from the manifold and stuff. With the exception of doing all that work, which I'm gonna do off camera, that should be the last thing that I do from the bottom of the car. That tie rod end that I thought was loose on that side just so happened to be a loose bolt. It wasn't loose itself. So I'm probably just gonna tighten it when I put it back together and I put the rack in fully. But I think I might also wait to bolt the rack down until I figure out this column thing, because this column won't fully engage. It'll go to about here as far as the engagement. It won't go all the way in, and that causes it to pop out, which has given me a bunch of problems when it comes to transporting this car, and we definitely don't want that happening while it's driving. So I might leave the rack unbolted until I get that figured out, then bolt it all back in. But for now, we're finally done with this. It took a lot longer than I expected, but it is what it is. Like, comment, subscribe, follow the build. Next video most likely is going to be the actual head gasket replacement and putting the head back on, properly decking this block so that's all good. I've decided that I'm not going to beat the piss out of the firewall. I'm going to allow the dowel pins to line the head up and then just put the studs in and go that route. But I will still hammer it a little bit to give a little extra clearance for that rear head drain. In the meantime, I'm gonna do a little bit of research because I don't plan on opening this motor back up until I'm going forged. So I'm gonna do a little research on these oil restrictors to see if the factory ones are good with the head drain that I have, to make sure that this is sufficient enough oil getting drained from the head. You know, that's the biggest problem with RBs, is that oil drain issue. So outside of that, that's gonna be it. We gonna get up out of here. And until next time, my friends.